Hello everyone. I hope you are staying sane during these uncertain times. My name is Ben Chappell, and I'm really missing sport during this never-ending coronavirus lockdown. But today, I wanted to bring you a short feature podcast. This is the first time I have done something like this, so I really hope you enjoy it. It's about one of my favorite images from last season's NBA playoffs. It's about that Kawhi bucket. You know the one. Game 7, Eastern Conference semifinals, the Toronto Raptors facing off against the Philadelphia 76ers. If you are just listening to the audio of this podcast, please refer to the cover photo. That is the focal point of this feature, and hopefully the image will help you follow along. But for everyone else, let's get into it. Here is the call from that fateful night.
You got to be aware of the inbounder here if you're Philly.
It's off to Leonard, defended by Simmons. Is this the dagger?
At that moment, the ball was hovering over the basket. It left Kawhi Leonard's fingertips just as time expired. Unlike a normal game winner, the ball took a cruel dance on the rim, bouncing 4 times before it finally hit its mark. In the eternity that it took to fall through the hoop, one of my favorite sports photos of the past year captured the emotion of the moment so perfectly, it could be painted up on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. What is so beautiful about it is the uncertainty of the moment, frozen in time, forever. Context is everything. For the Sixers, it was seemingly another failure of the process. For those that don't know, the process was a 5-year-in-the-making rebuild. Philadelphia used to be one of the consistently worst teams in the league. But after adding the likes of Joel Embiid, Ben Simmons, and others, the 76ers were one of the top contenders in the East. But that was about to end. And you can see the look on Joel Embiid's face. He looks like he's just seen a pileup on the interstate. Something so horrific that he can't look away. For the Raptors, at the time they didn't know if Kawhi, being their star player, was going to re-sign or not, and all of their apples were in that season's proverbial basket. They needed this one to drop. But Kawhi, as always, just has that assassin-for-hire type vibe going on. Tongue out, just willing the ball in the hoop. Finally, you have our unlikely protagonist, Jordan Lloyd. At the time, he was on a 2-way contract with the Raptors' G League affiliate. Last season was the only season that he saw NBA minutes in his entire basketball career. Like pretty much everyone else in the arena, he just looked happy to be there. And there you have it, a masterpiece of human emotion and Canadian sports history. It's that Kawhi bucket.
Game! Series! Toronto has won!
The photo instantly went viral on social media, and it was even posted by Canadian rapper and the Toronto Raptors global ambassador, Drake, on his Instagram account. Champagne Papi even went as far as to say he would spit a freestyle just to use the picture as the cover art. But I wanted to know who is the man behind the photo. Well, I tracked him down to talk about that picture, the Raptors' playoff run, and what life is like as a sports photographer. His name is Rick Madonik, and he's a photographer for the local newspaper, the Toronto Star. And according to Rick, he wasn't even planning on going to the arena that night.
I wasn't feeling well. It was a game 7. I didn't really want to deal with the hoopla or the dejection on the court. I'd been sick for a couple days, and I was actually going to watch the game at home. There was a bit of politics going on in the office too as to how many people we were going to have staff the game.
Yeah.
And I just kind of gave up and said, screw it, I'll watch it from home. And then my boss is like, no, you need to be there.
So just like that, Rick was told he was going to have to work the game. But unfortunately, local newspaper photographers lose some of their best shooting spots when the national press comes into town.
In Canada, our first problem is that there's a second TV rights holder. So first round, I actually lose my spot on the court because there's too much TV. So there's no locals on the court during the entire first round. Then when you get the second and third round, we get our spot back, but sometimes we're sharing it with one of the other locals, so we only get half the game. So that becomes a bit of a logistical thing as to, which quarters you're going to get, where you're going to shoot the opposite quarters that you're not on the court for.
When you can't fit everyone courtside, the photographers have to get a little creative. Luckily, Rick already had a spot in mind as backup.
He found that spot a couple of years ago when we started going deep into the run and we needed to find a better angle. We call it the gondola. It's basically where there's a lot of radio and TV commentators and stuff up there, and a lot of print journalists during overflow. And it's like the overhang for the hockey, where you're looking you're off the back of the building and you're looking kind of straight down at about 45 degrees. So it's an awkward angle. It works nice on one side because you can really isolate in the paint, just like if there's nothing else, there's no legs, even in fact, you can get rid of lines. But when you start looking at the opposite corner, like where that shot is, it gets really ugly. So it's pretty low percentage as to anything really coming out of there. Usually we get one or two, but I rely more on my remotes than I do from up there.
Yeah.
But it was one of those things, and that night it turned out to be the place to be because everybody on the court, it went so far into the corner, other than Canadian press, who was on that side of the court, nobody had much frames of it.
So, it wasn't ideal. The lighting wasn't perfect. You couldn't get a good shot of all four corners. Hell, he was basically stuck up in the rafters. But sometimes the stars align.
At the time, I almost recomposed, right? Because I was pretty tight in the corner because that's a really shitty corner to shoot.
Yeah.
The light really falls off, right? It's really messy with all those people. Usually there's no pitcher there. And what was it, 4 seconds left on the inbound? You knew Kawhi's going to take the picture, so I just stayed on him, wanted to keep my focus, and he's like fucking dribbling from the top all the way down the side into the corner. Dude, you're going to run out of time. And it went up, and I just stayed on him, and then he bent down, and I'm like, maybe I should recompose. Like, where's the ball? And then I see the tongue come out. And at that point, I'm like, okay, this is really taking too long. And I kind of noticed Embiid leaning in and looking, but I just stayed on him. And, once it dropped and his expression changed immediately, and then the roar of the crowd. But at that time, I don't remember seeing Jordan Lloyd creep into that picture at all. Like, I didn't even know who he was. We had to find out 20 minutes later.
So Rick had gotten the shot, a sliver of Toronto sports history. Kicked off his normal spot courtside, cramped up into the rafters at Scotiabank Arena. He had gotten the perfect angle of the historic moment. But I was curious. Did he know right then and there that he had struck gold?
It was the tongue, man. As soon as the tongue came out. I'm old enough. Michael Jordan used to play with his tongue out all the time. So, the tongue becomes a little thing. But it was the squat and the tongue. And it was like, oh, this is nice. And then, of course, I waited maybe 3 or 4 minutes while they did some handshaking before I ripped the card out and started transmitting, because I had my computer right beside me. And so it was in the office within 3 minutes. But I immediately sent an email to the sports guys saying, you're going to love the Jubo. You're just going to love it. And sure enough, they did. But it was like, don't even think about looking elsewhere. This is it.
It wasn't long before the photo began to spread on social media. On Twitter, Sports Illustrated posted the picture with the caption, "What an absolutely incredible photo." ESPN's Don Van Natta called it one of the best sports photos of all time. And of course, the photo went viral after Drake featured it on his Instagram account. But the age of social media and instantaneous sharing can be a double-edged sword for photographers. On one hand, your work can be seen by millions, but it can also go uncredited and unacknowledged.
Yeah, well, we started downsizing the pictures we put up on Twitter after, not necessarily because of that, but after that, especially with Twitter's new policy on they own everything, so they say. Because, Drizzy is one of those guys, freaking artist who doesn't recognize someone else's copyright. Like, come on, dude.
Yeah.
So he stole it right away, put it out, which is fine, but, at least credit it somewhere.
Regardless, Kawhi Leonard cemented himself in Toronto history that night. But as we now know, Kawhi wasn't planning on staying north of the border. So I had to know, what would Kawhi's legacy be like in Toronto if that shot had missed?
Ooh, that's a good question, because Vince Carter had the exact same shot. Well, not exact, but corner shot, buzzer beater. It was in Philly.
Yeah.
But it was the same scenario, go on or go home. And he missed. And he was the all-star at the time, and Vince was God at the time.
More than anything, Kawhi's game winner seemed to have lifted the Toronto basketball curse. The Raptors, formed in 1993, had never before won an NBA championship before last season. But it hasn't been for a lack of talent. In the early days, Vince Carter was the king of Toronto, but held back from a series of injuries and never being surrounded by all the pieces he needed, he was never able to put a significant playoff run together. In 2001, Vince and the Raptors had a fateful second-round matchup against, you guessed it, the Philadelphia 76ers, who were then led by their firecracker point guard, Allen Iverson. The Raptors took them all the way to the final moments of Game 7. Vince got the inbound, faked his defender into the crowd, and clank.
And the Sixers hold on and advance to the conference finals.
In the years since that fateful miss, Toronto fans have been left empty-handed year after year.
So I think what it did more of anything was reverse that kind of last second we can't win thing, and kind of gave people the idea that this team could actually do it.
It's also important to remember that Kawhi's buzzer beater, even though important, just got the Raptors out of the second round. There was still a lot more basketball to be played, but the momentum and the belief was now there.
Well, there's that, because I think that doesn't mean anything unless they get to the finals, right? Otherwise, it's just another buzzer beater. It's a Game 7, and it's got all that kind of hype, but really, that only got them to the Eastern Conference Finals. It didn't even get them to the championships. So unless they were going to make to the championships, it didn't really mean that much. And that was a bit of a problem I had with it too, because everyone was going so crazy about it. I'm like, okay, this doesn't really mean anything. It's just a pitch until we get somewhere.
It turned out the momentum from Kawhi's game winner would propel Toronto to an unlikely NBA championship. First, shutting down MVP Giannis Antetokounmpo and the Milwaukee Bucks, before besting arguably the greatest team of the modern era, the Golden State Warriors. It turns out, every great playoff run just needs that lucky bounce every now and then. Rick was lucky enough to make the trip to Oracle Arena and spoil the Warriors' house-leaving party. I'm going to play a clip of Rick's experience on that fateful day in the Bay. It is a good reminder of, one, how strange it is to win on enemy territory, and two, a great description of how hectic it is to cover such a moment for the photographers and other journalists that are present. Here it is.
To go, and I did go for Game 6, so I was in the arena when they actually won. So it was, because it's always weird when it's not the home team, right? Very weird for me because I'd never been in that building, so it was like my first night in there. Didn't know my way around, didn't know anything, did not know what had happened with Masai and the cop. When I was on the court, looking for whoever, and I'm like, where the fuck is Masai? I see Lowry running to the corner, so I like follow him over, and there he is grabbing him and dragging him on from the corner. And Masai looked like he was in shell shock.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why isn't he smiling? Like I did not know what had happened.
Quick side note, Masai Ujiri is the president of basketball operations for the Raptors. Following the final moments of the game, he was stopped from entering the celebrations by a police officer for not having proper credentials. It was a very controversial event and is a good example of the downside to winning on the road.
Yeah, and Kyle obviously had no idea what was going on. But the one thing I remember, I was close enough, Kyle was like screaming at him, "World fucking champion! World fucking champion!" like 3 times. And then he walked away from him. And it was like, and Masai's face never changed. And I'm like, something really weird happened. But I was so dead to deadlines. I had already missed the deadline. I did not know if I was going to make paper, trying to transmit with Wi-Fi signals that were like crazy. It was all very hectic and quick. And at some point after they had presented the trophy, I literally looked at the time, and I had 2.5 minutes before my final deadline, which they had already pushed by 20 minutes. And the Wi-Fi connection was so bad, I just grabbed everything, ran to the workroom, and pumped out like 4 pictures in the next minute. And luckily got the kiss of the trophy, and just after that.
So you got to kiss the trophy?
Yeah, but I didn't do everything I would have liked to have done because I didn't have time, right?
Yeah.
I couldn't wait for everyone to touch the damn thing and have their moment with it. I do not have a good frame of Masai with the trophy. But, I had the 3 principal players with it, and they're all like looking at it lovingly. And I'm like, okay, I got to go.
Toronto, we are a city of champions. We're the best city in the world. I've traveled all over the world, and nothing's like Toronto.
Man, this is poetic. This is poetic. You just gotta watch it happen. The 6-6. Kyle Lowry with the ring. Kawhi Leonard bringing the chips to the city. I want my chips with the dip. That's all I know. I don't want my chips plain. I want my chips with the dip.
What does that make Kawhi Leonard?
The closest thing to Jordan that the Philadelphia 76ers have seen. I'm not certainly making that comparison, but I'm just talking about the level of dominance.
This era of the NBA of super teams, big threes, this right here is one of the single greatest runs by an individual that I've seen in a very long time.
Fun guy, what's up, baby?
What it do, baby?
Yeah, you already know.
I don't see how it's not one of the biggest moments in Toronto sports history, period. The thing about Toronto, though, Toronto fans, is they will never forget it. He will never be hated for leaving. He will be loved for bringing a championship.
That's it. That's the podcast. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun making it. Special shout out to Rick Madonik. I think it was a really interesting chat. Moral of the story, Kawhi Leonard is a bad man. Stay safe out there, everybody.